Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me all right? Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming for the Champaign County History Museum and the Champaign Public Libraries Tuesday at 10. This is a partnered event where we're going to be telling history of our local community for the next 3 weeks until the end of July. So for the next 2 Tuesdays at 10, we'll have 2 more presentations for you to enjoy and to learn a little bit more about our local community. Now, this week it's pretty special. Both the Urbana Free Library and the Champaign Public Library the last few years have been celebrating major milestones in their histories, with both of them celebrating their 150th anniversaries. This year, specifically, is the Champaign Public Library's 150th, and we'll be talking a little bit about their history here in just a minute. But I want to thank everybody for coming, and at the very least, if there's any questions, I'll make sure that we have time at the end to be able to answer them. But we'll start first with just a brief explanation about the history of the Champaign Public Library, as if you'd like to learn more about the Champaign Public Library's history, you'll have to come to their birthday party next week, or you can listen to Tuesday at 10 that was done by one of the local librarians and historians who did a deep dive into the library's history. So make sure to go and check that out if you'd like a little bit more history about this library. The library's story begins shortly after the incorporation of the city of Champaign in 1860. During the community's early years, taxes were used to improve the infrastructure of the community, as well as improve businesses and homes as they popped up around the new depot. In 1868, the Champaign Library Association opened its first home on the second floor of 7 Main in downtown Champaign, which would be located on this stretch of road here just down the block. Unfortunately, we don't have a picture of the first library's location, but this is an image of what downtown Champaign looked like in the 1860s and 70s. So you've got Barrett's Hall, which was the first brick structure built in downtown Champaign here at the corner of Main Street and the intersection here at Neal, and then the library would have been just a few buildings down. This was a subscription library, meaning that you had to pay to be able to have access to the library's collection and any events that were held there. It had about 40 members at the time of the association's opening, and during this time the association welcomed speakers and authors to the local community, looking to raise funds going towards the purchases of new books. In 1877, the city took ownership of the library and it moved to 24 East Main Street. It lived briefly in the original city building until wealthy banker A.C. Burnham donated $50,000 for the purchase of a new library to be built as a memorial to his wife Julia, who was a member of the library board. This is a picture of the original city building in which the library was first located in a more somewhat permanent home. $40,000 would be used to build the new library, and the Burnham Athenaeum on the north side of West Side Park would open. The remaining $10,000 would be used as an endowment to purchase books. The new library opened its doors in 1896, continuing as a free library at this point. The library eventually added a children's wing in 1916 on the second floor. The library lived successfully in the Athenaeum until the 1970s, when it was apparent that it had run out of space like many other businesses and buildings in the local community. There's a picture of the children's wing shortly after its opening. The city then constructed a new library at 505 South Randolph Street. This new library wasn't entirely up to the community's expectations, however. Some community members likened it to a factory or a garage and were displeased with the library's more modern and brutalistic look. Additional issues with the building's construction led to increased energy costs and a lack of accessibility. And so in 2008, a new library opened, 3 times larger than the building it replaced. In 2023, the library expanded services into their basement of their new building, adding a new maker space called the Studio, with 3D printers, sewing machines, recording booths, and a computer lab. The first branch of the Champaign Public Library opened on the east side of the railroad tracks, originally built on University Avenue, and then shortly moved to Springfield Avenue just after the start of the 20th century. These small branches would continue throughout the library's history. In 1941, the Douglas Community Center in the historic North End would be constructed. The Douglas Community Center began to raise money early in 1941, looking to build their new community center. Among the most celebrated programs at the Douglas Center was the all-male drum corps and all-female drill team, which won first place in the National Elks competition in 1968. In 1970, the Douglas Center Library was organized as a joint project between the Twin Cities, the Lincoln Trail Library System, and the Champaign Park District. The library initially inhabited a room at the Douglas Community Center, and then opened a branch of the Champaign Public Library in 1972, when Urbana discontinued its involvement due to financial reasons. It was then moved to a small building at 310 East Bradley, and in 1975, a group of 200 residents protested plans by the city who were looking to demolish the old Douglas Community Center for a new gymnasium. The city and the community compromised, and the old center was demolished later that year, and a new center was dedicated on December 12, 1976. The Douglas Branch Library, though, wouldn't arrive at the Douglas Center until 1997, when the 6,000 square foot building was constructed. The project was funded by the Champaign Public Library, the City of Champaign, the Illinois State Library, the Champaign Park District, and the Champaign Public Library Foundation. There's a picture from its initial construction when it was just being planned, and from its initial dedication all the way back in the 1970s. The artwork in front of the library, Frederick Douglass in Remembrance, was created by Preston Jackson. Jackson was a graduate student at the University of Illinois and was a local jazz musician during his time in the community. It was commissioned by the Champaign Public Library Foundation and dedicated on August 14, 1999. We'll now move to talk about our other community's large library, the Urbana Free Library. Built in 1918, the Samuel T. Busey Memorial Library has been serving the Urbana community for more than 100 years and is one of the oldest public libraries in the state of Illinois. The library was first established when the subscription library model was popular, so the city felt compelled to be clear that the library was free and open to the public, branding it as the Urbana Free Library, which we still use today. The first library organization in Urbana was the 1854 Urbana Library Society, organized by local citizens. In 1872, interest in an Urbana library was rekindled by a new group, the Young Men's Library Association, made up of about 52 men in the local community. They met initially at Busey Hall to create a joint stock association, with each member asked to contribute $25 to the cause. They were successful the following year in opening a reading room in February. Books and magazines were donated by local community members. But it wouldn't take long for the city of Urbana to take interest in taking control of the library. And so on June 1st, 1874, the Urbana government proposed a new free public library in Urbana, and in a week it was accepted. It opened first on the second floor of the Tiernan block, seen here in this picture on Main Street, which is now the home of Encanto and was the longtime home of Crane Alley. It shortly, though, moved over to the Gill Building, now known as the Knowlton and Bennett Building, just at the corner of Main and Race Streets in downtown Urbana. In 1894, the library moved once again to the first floor of the Urbana City Building. This greatly increased attendance, however, there were issues. It would continue successfully, but there were issues with the police bullpen, located just beneath the library, as patrons were often interrupted by loud citizens sobering up in the holding cells just underneath their feet. A combination of these issues and others led to a proposal for a new library building to be built by the Urbana Commercial Club in 1908. From the library's inception in 1874, the Urbana Free Library was supported by the mill tax. The one mill tax collected $1 for every $1,000 of assessed property in Urbana annually. This money was used by the library in every way, including paying rent, buying books, paying staff, and pretty much everything else they needed. In 1888, the tax was increased to a 2 mill tax to meet the needs of the growing library. This tax was vital when the Library Association sought to contact and attract Andrew Carnegie to donate funds to build a new library for the local community. In 1910, Carnegie's secretary responded that if the community purchased a site and raised just 10% of the total building's cost, he would donate the rest of the funds to the project. In 1914, a proposal was made to Urbana citizens asking them to pass a $10,000 bond measure supporting the Urbana Library. This was the first proposition in the history of Urbana for which women were permitted to vote, and it passed with an overwhelming majority. As plans continued, Carnegie abruptly pulled his support, stating that he felt that the city could afford its own building without his assistance. Following this decision, W.E. Coffin, the chairman of the Library Building Committee, responded, Andrew Carnegie can take his blood money and go to hell. Urbana is going to build a library with Urbana money, and Urbana is going to own it. Familiar name Mary E. Busey came to the rescue in 1917. Mary donated $35,000 as a memorial for her late husband, General Samuel T. Busey, Civil War veteran, businessman, and 5-time mayor of Urbana. Joseph William Royer was appointed architect for the building, and the construction was awarded to A.W. Stuhlman in April. Stuhlman is also well known for constructing a number of other important buildings in the local community, including the Virginia Theater. The Urbana Free Library first opened its doors the following year on July 8, 1918. Designed in a classical revival style, it was built to be as fireproof as possible, made with concrete and marble. The building featured a magazine, children's, catalog, reference, and general reading room on the first floor. In the basement was a large lecture room, book stacks, storage, and the English room, which was devoted to the Champaign County Historical Society. Over the years, it's received numerous additions and renovations, including major renovations in 1975, 2005, and recently just last year. Let's now switch and take a look at some of the more rural libraries scattered throughout our community. And there's a picture of the new entrance. The Mahomet Town and Country Club was organized under the name Mahomet Junior Women's Club. The group helped to push for public projects and improvements throughout the Mahomet community. The Mahomet Public Library was envisioned by the Mahomet Town and Country Women's Club, who pushed for a referendum to be passed to create a library for the local community in the 1960s. They were successful in April 1966 when residents passed a referendum, and the library opened initially in a small storefront on Main Street. The Women's Club remained involved in the library, holding book sales and fundraising events to support the local organization. In 1977, like many of the other libraries, they too had grown too large to stay in their small storefront. And so the library board purchased and remodeled a building and moved into it in 1981, seen in this picture. In 2007, the city once again looked to expand the library, and so the current library opened in 2010 off of Highway 150. This year, just as a quick note, the voters narrowly rejected a referendum to request $8.9 million to expand the library with a new children's, teen, and community space, with the original building seen in the darker gray section with the originally planned expansions, which were rejected. It was rejected by like 70 votes. It was very close. Let's now take a look at the Rantoul Public Library. This also dates back to the 1800s, much like the Champaign Public Library and Urbana Free Library, and was first known as the Rantoul Literary Society. Formed in 1876 on the second floor of the town hall, the library contained 2,500 bound volumes on history, fiction, and science. The library featured volumes on geology, archaeology, and zoology specifically. And it was originally managed by A.H. Bailey. The society held annual socials in the Rantoul Town Hall featuring essays on history and social topics. The library was accessible to all paying members of the society, and the funds were used to hopefully hire a librarian one day. It remained volunteer-run, though, throughout its history, and the society was unable to hire a librarian, so it was dissolved sometime before 1885. All books and periodicals were then donated to the Methodist Episcopal Church. The current library was established in the 1930s when the Rantoul Women's Club organized a volunteer library. They sought to get tax funding to support the endeavor, which failed by just a few votes. Undeterred, the Women's Club asked the village board to restart the library in the village hall, which they agreed. Members reached out to local schools, churches, and individuals to donate books to the cause. They volunteered their time to keep the library open with more than 700 books on its shelves. In 1935, Rantoul finally passed a referendum supporting a free library for the local community, which allowed them to also hire their first librarian, Beth Ann Snowden, and then Elsie Gordon, member of the Women's Club and seen here, became the librarian in 1940, serving for over 30 years. In 1951, the library moved to a new building at the corner of Route 136 and 45. The dedication coincided with the Illinois Central Railroad Centennial, and both celebrated together. Land for the library was originally owned by the railroad, and so the library hosted Sunday services And the library eventually hosted Sunday services for the Emmanuel Southern Baptist Church for a few years after its opening. The library also hosted the Girl and Boy Scouts for programming and fundraising events. In 1960, the library received additions that nearly doubled the space inside the building. In 1970, the library joined the Lincoln Trails Library System. In 2000, the library board and Rantoul Village Board agreed to move the library into a new building. And 3 years later, the library moved to its present location at 106 West Flessner, which featured over 20,000 feet of usable space, more than double their old home. Let's see. Looks like my slides got moved around a little bit. We'll go back around. The Tolono Public Library dates back to 1886, with its first home in the north room of Burns Jewelry Store on Main Street in downtown Tolono. The library held nearly 600 volumes by the end of the decade. In 1897, the library moved to a new home in the Redhead building, and its collection now consisted of over 1,000 books. Shortly after the move, the library donated nearly all of its collection to the Tolono High School. The Redhead building was likely the offices of the Redhead Lumber Company, which was one of the major employers in the local community. Their time in the Tolono High School, though, was short-lived, and it once again moved to the Citizens Bank on Main Street in 1913. We then lost track of the library until the 1930s. Yeah, looks like some of my slides got deleted. Apologies about that. But here, I can play this just in the background for you folks. This is actually footage from the move. And I'll mute it for you. From their move, when they moved from their old building to their new home.
Is this Rantoul?
This is Tolono. So, at this point, the library had short hours, open only from 1:30 to 4:30 on Saturdays, and held around 600 books in their current home. The current library began as a service project in 1967. The Tolono Junior Service Club convened at the end of the year and selected the establishment of a library as its primary project. The club visited other libraries in the area that were members of the Lincoln Trails Library System and began plans for a referendum to support the project. At the end of 1968, the referendum passed, and the library opened its doors on July 25, 1969, with Margaret Reefstack as the first librarian. In 1886, a second referendum was passed, converting the library into a library district, bringing along other communities through its doors. A referendum to add the residents from Posodum was initially rejected, but a 1994 referendum was passed, adding residents from the village of Savoy to their district. In 1997, Margaret Roy and Mary Quinn left money to have a new library built, which they currently reside in today. The library holds nearly 40,000 books, audiobooks, DVDs, and video games, and hosts a variety of programming. This footage was kindly provided to me by Gail Williams, who's in the crowd today. She and the Tolono Public Library helped give me some information and photographs that I was able to share with you today. But all of this information and photographs and this video will be up on the museum's website, and we'll be sharing with the Tolono Public Library for them to share as well. So if you want to see the whole video, you'll be able to watch it. So yeah, they gave out shirts, which had a picture of the new Tolono Public Library building on it, and then on the back, as you'll see, a lot of the kids brought along their little red wagons to be able to carry books over from their old home to their new one. All right. The St. Joseph Women's Club was organized in 1903 with 27 members. This organization was integral in pushing for public improvement projects, including the construction of the St. Joseph High School. In 1922, a survey was conducted on whether a library should be established in the town hall. Responses were favorable, and books were to be loaned for free with open hours 3 days of the week. However, plans for a library wouldn't come to fruition until the St. Joseph Township Library was established in 1929 by volunteers from the St. Joseph Women's Club. It was originally located in the old Henderson Beauty Shop in downtown St. Joe. The beauty shop didn't last long, however, and the library's collection was then moved to the St. Joseph High School. There's some contention about exactly when the library opened, as some articles state that the library opened in 1929, but the St. Joseph Centennial states that the library didn't open until 1934. So believe who you want. 2 years later, though, a referendum failed in 1936 to raise funds to construct a new home for the library. And so the library continued to live in the high school until 1950, when it was moved to the St. Joseph Town Hall. In 1955, Maud Davis purchased a site for a new library, named after her parents, the Swearingen Memorial Library. The still active St. Joseph Women's Club became the Board of Trustees and helped staff the local library. It opened its doors in October 1956. In 1973, a referendum was passed to provide a tax base for the library, and its first librarian was hired. In 1988, the library received a state grant to expand, and it reopened the following year to its current size and state. Just a quick brief history of the Ogden Rose Library. The Ogden Rose Library traces its story back to 1882, when it first opened at the J.S. Cox's drugstore in downtown Ogden. The library lived there until 1912, when John Rose donated land for which the city was to build a new town hall, stipulating that one room be reserved for a library. 4 years later, when Rose passed, he willed $800 to start the library. The city then instituted a 2 mil tax, much like the Urbana Library, to support the new endeavor. The library would not open, though, until 1923, with Verma Hill serving as its first librarian. Much like the Tolono Library, the Ogden Rose Library became part of the Lincoln Trail Library System. It lived in the Ogden Town Hall for 77 years, but on April 19, 1996, when an F3 tornado touched down in Ogden, destroying 68 homes, 12 businesses, 3 churches, the grade school, it also destroyed the library. After the tornado, the community rebuilt, and the library reopened at its current location at 103 West Main Street. It is currently part of the Heartland Library System. Here's a picture of the interior library in its current location, and possibly my favorite tradition is Roberta Morris's Christmas Village, displayed at the library beginning in 2022, with donations made to benefit the library and still occurs year to year. The last library we'll quickly touch upon is the Philo Public Library District. The Philo Literary Society began in 1873 with the assistance of university students. By 1875, the society had over 30 members holding meetings and gatherings once a month. The society continued for over 35 years, growing in membership before eventually disbanding sometime after 1910. In 1961, the Philo Women's Club began plans to create a new library for their community. President Mrs. Nathan L. Rice appointed a committee to begin looking for buildings and for books. They focused on an empty building next to the Philo Post Office, owned by Richard Franks, which was available for rent for just $15 a month. I don't have a picture of the library, however, you can see the flagpole for the Philo Post Office here, so my assumption is it is located either in the empty lot just to its west, or in this building just to its east on Main Street in downtown Philo. Books could be acquired through a state library service for 3 months without charge for postage. The committee also accepted donations from local community members and businesses. The Philo Booster Club donated 150 feet of metal shelving. The Philo Exchange Bank donated Lyman Hazen's unused library table and chair for their front desk. Allie O'Neill's Tavern donated round tables, and accompanying chairs were brought in from the Philo Town Hall. Photographs to decorate the new space were donated by local community members. The library opened its doors for the first time on January 27, 1962. Over 100 community members came to the library on opening day, and by the end of the month, registration had increased to 345. In less than 6 months, the library was already bursting at the seams, and so an addition would be constructed. The library was so successful that the Women's Club could not manage it themselves. And so in November, the city passed a referendum for the city to provide tax dollars to support the new township library. The library hired its first professional librarian, and in 1966, after being run entirely by volunteers for more than 4 years. Mrs. Lothrop Peets was hired right after she graduated from library school in the community. The following year, the library joined the Lincoln Trail system. By 1975, the library had entirely paid staff and over 10,000 books in circulation. The Philo Women's Club, despite not being directly involved, remained dedicated to supporting the library, holding fundraisers and book drives. The library moved to its current home in 1996, converting an old bank into its new home, and is currently a member of the Heartland Library System. And there's a picture of the interior of the Philo Library. And there is only one other library in the community, though it doesn't have much recorded history, unfortunately, which is the Sydney Community Bank, Sydney Community Library. It's been operational, though, for over 50 years. It celebrated its 50th anniversary just a couple of years ago. It originally started in downtown Sydney and in an old drugstore, and is essentially still in that same spot today. But the one thing I always want to make sure, if you would like to know more about the history of the library and help celebrate its history, make sure to come next week on Tuesday the 21st to the Champaign Public Library to help celebrate their 150th. All right. And then one final note, the Fisher Library was looking to open a library last year and was also looking to pass a referendum to be able to have the city support it. It unfortunately failed last year by less than 30 votes. But I'll take questions.
I want to hear about this colonial move. That was awesome.
Yeah, I can bring the footage back up. Yeah,
Did they seriously just reach out to the community and say, help us move?
The answer is yes. They absolutely
That is
did.
so cool.
I'll skip a little bit ahead, but I can leave that. I'll leave it on mute so we can still ask and answer questions.
So how far was the new location from the old location?
Not terribly far, about a block or two. So it wasn't exactly an incredibly long walk with, your little red wagon, but it was still, a way to bring the community together to be able to have them assist in getting the new library opened. Gail, I'm not sure if you know how many people helped move the library, but it was a considerable amount of volunteers who helped move everything over.
Those kids will probably be telling stories about helping move for the rest of their lives.
Oh, I'm sure they are.
Hey, Gail, did your local grocery store just say, hey, take these carts and help move?
Yeah, the IGA, whatever.
I love the buy-in. That's so excellent.
Go ahead.
Why did the couple of libraries change from Lincoln Trails to Heartland?
That's a good question. The Lincoln Trail system is still technically in operation today, but essentially there were more localized organizations like the Heartland Trail system, which primarily focused on kind of east central Illinois areas and more kind of east Midwest. The trail system, essentially the way that those function is that it's a moving book service. And so that they would transport books from library to library as transfers, and so that way they could keep rotating books through circulation, and so that the library collection wouldn't remain stagnant. And so these would continue, and so they take books to every single library in their system.
Do we still do Lincoln Trails here?
That's a good question. We might.
I think I know the answer to
Yeah,
that.
great.
Yeah.
So it must have been about 15 years ago. There used to be a number of these local systems like Lincoln Trail, and they're operated by or funded by the state library. So the state was divided north and south, and there are two systems. Heartland is everything south of probably I-74, and then Rails does everything north of that. So I think Lincoln Trail is now like a hub, or it's a part of Heartland. And it was done for efficiency and all. So I do have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, actually two. First, in 1969, I believe the athletic teams moved books into the then newly built undergraduate library at the university. And I had many students, or former students, who would come back and talk about that. The other is just to mention, it's not a public library in the sense of that word, but any resident of Illinois can get a card to borrow books from the U of I library. There's no free pass on parking, which is usually
Yeah.
the problem. But buses though, I mean, they go right to the
Is the
side
U
door.
of I library free?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes it is.
Mhm.
You don't get, you can borrow books, but that's about it. I mean, anyone can walk in and have access to the databases that are there. But you don't get interlibrary loan, you get shorter loan periods and things like that. But yes, anyone can get one, as long as you show proof of residence.
Any other questions?
It's not a question, it's just, I think it's notable that women in that age were the ones who started many of these libraries.
Oh yes, women's clubs were integral in a lot of local social and community projects that were meant to better their communities. Out of all of the libraries throughout the rural communities in Champaign County, women's clubs had a part in starting pretty much every single one of them.
And even today, I know of many book clubs, but they're all women. I don't know if men have book clubs or not, but it seems to be we're carrying on the tradition.
Yeah, they're men.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking from these comments just now about women, it seemed to me that in the movies, like It's a Wonderful Life or different movies, the women librarians would look like they were unhappy, kind of dowdy and unhappy and such. And I wondered where they got that reputation when so many women were encouraging, these great
Well, not in the
libraries.
Music Man.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
That's the subplot of the Music Man,
Okay.
Mary and the
Or
librarian.
desk set.
But
Desk set?
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember that.
Oh, it's a Spencer Tracy,
Oh, okay.
Catherine Hepburn movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a corporate library, but, oh yeah.
I probably saw it on the early show after school.
Mary,
And those
did you have a
women in
question?
desk set knew everything there was to
They
know.
were the human computers, yes.
Absolutely.
They beat out the computer that Spencer brought in.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful movie.
And what did you were saying about the Ogden Library with the Christmas decorations? I don't know about that.
Yes, that was just a recent tradition that started after COVID.
Okay.
Roberta Morris, who's a local community member in the Ogden area, she had done this previously, in fact, before she moved to the Ogden area.
Okay.
She has an extensive Christmas Village collection. And so for the past couple of years, she has been building her Christmas Village in the Ogden Rose Library, and they've been fundraising, utilizing it. You can make donations, and all donations have gone towards the Ogden Library to help them continue to buy new books and host programming there. But yeah, keep an eye out. The Ogden Rose Library posts about when that's going to go up. Yeah.
I had a question about, what was the name of the donor that pulled the funds for Champaign?
Oh, for the Urbana Free Library? That was Carnegie, Andrew Carnegie.
So I wonder why, because there's Carnegie
Mhm.
libraries worldwide, and did it just not meet his plans for, his requirements to put his name on it? Because he did one up in Paxton.
He did, and the thing for me, there wasn't a lot of explanation. However, I think that the passing that the city did of a city bond to help raise money for the library, I think kind of drove him to cancel his donations. It showed that the city would be more actively involved in starting the library than just like a community organizing and raising funds themselves.
But also attached to that, are there limitations like with any historical building for remodeling once it's a Carnegie library, like in Paxton remodel, because it's not very efficient up there. I just can't imagine.
Yeah, there are some general restrictions on remodeling historic buildings. We've done that ourselves when we've remodeled our historic cattle bank
Exactly.
to be able to keep up its historic imagery and ensure that it's preserved for future generations as well. So there are restrictions.
Thank you. Also on the Rose Christmas Village, I do know that the library told her they wouldn't store her village there anymore. So it
Oh,
might
that's a
take a
shame.
little longer for her to get set up.
Got
They'll
it,
still do
okay.
it, but they needed the space, of course.
Sure.
And it's huge and worth the trip. It is amazing.
Oh yeah, there was a piece by WCIA, I think last year, that included some footage of the Christmas Village, and it is massive. It takes up like a huge part of a room.
Yes. Check it out.
I wonder, when did libraries start incorporating more things than books? Because it's amazing now what things you can borrow from libraries.
Mhm.
And I wondered when that started and, you know, what was the instigation of that?
Yeah.
As
Yeah,
soon-
go ahead.
Yeah, basically, as soon as new things came along and people wanted them, libraries started buying them.
Mhm. Yeah, literary societies were kind of the first initial put for more collectivized collections of publications and materials outside of schools. Literary societies were usually just kind of community-led organizations without a centralized meeting spot. And that was their big difference between a library that was a subscription-based library and a literary society. Literary societies would usually kind of meet in people's homes or in community centers, and they would share their own books. So it's not like the literary society usually had a collection. It's one of the reasons why the Rantoul Literary Society was kind of really well known as one of the best literary societies in Champaign County and kind of East Central Illinois because of how dense the collection from their members was. But then libraries, once they started to come around, even when they were still subscription-based, the whole point of the library was to have a centralized spot for the community to gather to be able to access information. And that was, yeah, usually 1800s, mid-late 1800s, early 1900s for Champaign County specifically.
So I have a question, but back to the question of,
Mhm.
you know, when did libraries start collecting things other than books and magazines and newspapers, which I assume were what formed the core of the original collections. And this is just what I'm familiar with myself. I know that microfilm and then subsequently microfiche started to become available, I think, in the early 40s. And they were sold to libraries, especially academic libraries, but I assume public, as space savers.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, the Urbana Free Library has an extensive collection of microfilm that you'd actually have the opportunity to look through. The museum utilizes their collection quite extensively whenever we're doing research.
So my question really, it's more amusing, about drugstores. You know, a number of these libraries were housed in drugstores at one point or another. And I'm aware that drugstores, at least in the early 20th century, had rental libraries, basically. You could go and they were only like bestsellers. And you could rent a book for, a nickel or a dime a week. So I don't know if there's any connection there or not, but they may have already been set up to handle books.
It was possibly. The reason why a lot of the early libraries inhabited drugstores, I'm not entirely sure. It seemed to be, from some of the research I found in newspaper articles, is that those were just buildings that were available for rent. That being said, with them being drugstores, I imagine just the already built available shelving within them was probably also a draw. Go ahead.
Historically, were publishers initially upset with the concept of a library taking away potential royalties and the sale of books?
That's a good question. Not that I know of, but yeah, if you can answer, that'd be great.
I don't think they were upset about the initial libraries, but they were very upset about interlibrary loan. It was every library should be buying their own books. And I was at meetings in the 1980s and 90s where publishers were still railing at us librarians about interlibrary loan and its evils.
The trail system essentially allowed libraries to not have to purchase nearly as many publications, which is why a lot of rural libraries have been able to continue to exist. It's because they don't need to worry about paying as much to get additional material. The system will provide for that.
Right. But the magazine publishers,
Sure.
journal publishers, starting in, probably in the mid-70s, started charging libraries significantly more for a subscription than they did for individuals.
That's happening with digital books right now.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? All right. Well, I thank you all for coming to our Tuesdays at 10 on the history of libraries in Champaign County. Our next Tuesday at 10 next week is going to be Perry Morris, our vice president, who's in the crowd today, who will be talking about the journey of Virginia and Chick's sail from Urbana to Hollywood. And then we'll be finishing off with me again the following week with the history of the community of Urbana. So thank you for joining us for today, and I hope to see you next week.